Good evening, it's 9 p.m. This is the India Development Debate. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy joining you live from the news center in Mumbai, and joining me in Delhi is my colleague Supriya Srinath. Straight on to the debate tonight. The state of Gujarat clocked an average GDP growth of over 10% between 2001 and 2012. No mean feat considering the poor farm output in this coastline state which gets scanty rainfall. What makes it more interesting is the fact that this high growth was achieved during the tenure of Narendra Modi, who headed the state during the period. Quite naturally, there were hopes that the Gujarat model will be replicated at the national level when Modi became the Prime Minister after the 2014 polls. While that didn't happen, what is more interesting is the fact that there is no talk of the Gujarat model of development, which caught the fancy of everyone, both locally and internationally. Even on the last day of campaigning in the state, it finds no mention.
It does not. The Gujarat model is the topic of discussion on the India development debate tonight because of several reasons. For one, critics say the so-called development completely sidestepped farmers and the poor. They also point to Gujarat's poor show in basic socio-economic parameters like poverty alleviation, education and basic health care. On the India development debate this evening, we raise some crucial questions. Is Gujarat model an effective economic tool that can help uplift living standards? Is it possible to implement it at the national level? The Gujarat model, myth versus reality, is a big topic of discussion and debate on the India development debate just ahead of the last phase of Gujarat polls, right here on ET Now. And joining us on the show on the India development debate this evening is a stellar panel of experts and expert commentators. We've got Swaminathan Iyer, consulting editor ET Now, Ghanshyam Shah, former National Fellow, Indian Council of Social Science Research, Ruben Abraham, CEO and Senior Fellow, IDFC Institute, Dr. Indira Hirve, Director and Professor of Economics, Center of Development Alternatives, Zafar Sare Shawala, Founder, Parsoli Motors and Chancellor, Maulana Azad National Urdu University. Thanks each one of you for being with us and joining us on the show tonight. Ruben Abraham, if I may begin with you. The Gujarat model of development has been spoken about, it has been quoted domestically, globally. It really did put Modi on the map. It put him in the Prime Minister's chair, many believe. What do you believe is so unique about the Gujarat development model?
Yeah, so there is no doubt, especially when we look at absolute numbers, that Gujarat has made rapid strides, especially in the decade under Mr. Modi. However, the question really to ask here is, do high growth rates result in something net positive for the population? And I think that's where the evidence is a little bit more shaky when it comes to Gujarat. Now, I know this is a little bit of a digression for your show, but I think it's important to highlight this for people interested in the economic development question, which is anytime we talk about economic models, we're constantly having this argument between the Gujarat model, the Kerala model, the Bihar model, etc. To me, it appears that it's because people aren't actually watching closely, watching the data very closely. So if you actually look at the poverty headcount ratio between, say, 1993 and 2012, astonishingly, if you were to use decline in poverty as a useful proxy for what growth can bring about, actually the most significant drop in poverty you will realize is actually in Andhra Pradesh, where poverty in 1993 was at 44.6% and it dropped to 9.2% in 2012. In Gujarat, on the other hand, it was at 37.8%, so it was significantly lower than Andhra Pradesh to start with, but it's only declined to about 16.6% in the same period. So in effect, I mean, as a development question, I think the real question to be asking is, what has Andhra Pradesh really done in this mix over those 20 years? So this is not to take away anything from what happened in Gujarat, and certainly what happened in Gujarat from 1950 onwards. So if you look at literacy, if you look at infant mortality, on a lot of these measures, Gujarat has actually improved a fair bit. But the question really is relative to what? So if you look at Gujarat relative to the country, of course, Gujarat is an outperformer. But the minute you start comparing Gujarat to other big states that have performed well, the evidence gets a little bit more sketchy.
Okay. Interesting point you're making, and we will debate some of that in greater detail as we take this forward in the debate. But Swami, let me get your opening comments on this debate on the Gujarat model of development. We've kept politicians out of this debate for a reason. We want experts to talk about this. What's your own sense? Is there more hype than truths to the Gujarat model of development, or are we being unfair to a state that has seen growth of about 10% over a decade, if one were to look at it?
There are two models. One is the historical Gujarat model, and the other is the changes that Modi brought about. And you need to disentangle those two. The historical one, business-friendly state, highly capital-intensive investment in oil, chemicals, cement, stuff like that, pharmaceuticals. Therefore, you had very rapid growth, but not very fast formal sector job growth. Poor social indicators, not very good on education and health. So a fast-growing state, a developed state, and yet a state in which there were various shortcomings. That was the historical thing. What were the tweaks Modi gave to it? Modi, for instance, made it a very fast-growing agricultural state, which was not its reputation earlier at all. A combination of check dams, Narmada water, promotion of BT cotton, and promotion of winter wheat. I mean, these gave it, Mr. Ashok Gulati claims 10% rate of growth for almost a decade in agriculture, which is a phenomenal rate. So that was one major thing. Number two, he changed the electricity system. He became the first state where they cracked down on all power theft, charged everybody, and all three electrical utilities, the transmission, the generation, and the distribution, all became profitable. Farmers were getting stuff, This again was a Modi innovation. The Modi model, once again, was a very strong chief minister with an empowered bureaucracy. He cut out the cabinet ministers, the MLAs, and he said there are too many guys with their own vested interests trying to sabotage policy. So I will empower the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy was enthused, it innovated, it came forward with various new ideas. He was very conscious about the problem of labor and not having enough jobs. Therefore, at enormous expense, he attracted the Tata Nano factory. And people said this is a huge giveaway, scam, and so on. But he said, look, the important thing is not Tata. If Tata comes in, I will create an auto hub. And that auto hub has been created. Today, there are more than 50 ancillaries going up to 350. Nano has been a flop. But nevertheless, Suzuki has come in, Honda has come in, Hero has come in, Ford has come in. I mean, Gujarat has now become an auto hub, and they started changing. And finally, I would say that Modi developed Chiman Bhai's idea of the port-based development. The idea of expanding a large number of private ports to make them much larger than even the major ports. Right. So you have Mudra, you have Pipavav, you had Sikka, you have Vadanar, apart from Dahej, Hazira, new ones, Mithirvirdi, Positra, and so on, all on the anvil. So, the idea of port-based development, again, is something executed by Modi, although conceived earlier. So I would say that, there were historical things, and there was what Modi has done. And what Modi has done was distinctive, and in some ways is being replicated in other states, certainly in regard to the power forms, as regard the port-based development, as regards the importance of check dams. Many of these things other states are also following. So he has made a difference. I have to add, however, that when I was in the state last,
right,
I met Hardik Patel's fellows. I mean, the story they said was interesting. They said, look, historically, Patels moved out of agriculture into small business of various kinds. But now he said, because of Chinese competition and dumping, all our attempts to go into small business are failing. Therefore, we now have to get into government service. So, I mean, this is a new twist, a new development.
And which is why the call for reservation.
This, I think, is one of the major problems they're facing.
Right. Fair point indeed. I think you've made a very good distinction that there is a Modi model of development and there was a pre-Modi model of development for Gujarat, and some of what he's done has been very distinctive and replicated. I'm going to go across to Ghanshyam Shah, and sir, you can't deny the fact that Gujarat is the only state in India where the share of industry to GDP has gone up over a period of time, that has been disproportionately gone up, and that has added to economic growth. Many will turn around and ask, what is wrong with that? I mean, economic growth, like they say, is a rising tide that lifts all boats. And given that, the industry to GDP share is perhaps a good metric to go with. And what's wrong with that? Because a lot of people raise eyebrows over this. We're just simply questioning. Why would anybody bother about it?
That is true. I think Swaminathan very rightly said that what present Gujarat model, what I would call is a Modi model, as a historical legacy. Before 2000, Gujarat had a same high rate of growth. Modi added it on the pot and other kind of a thing. I think what the Swaminathan has also forgotten one thing, that during the earlier period, the bureaucrats were powerful, and it were the bureaucrats who initiated, contacted investors, and state government gave them a lot of freedom. And same traditions have continued later on under the Modi's rule. But in the past and today, I think more or less the similar on a social sector. Earlier also it was not paid much attention, and Modi has no priority to that. I think one has to accept, so there is the same continuity since after the liberalizations, many things have happened now.
Okay, you're making a very important point. You're saying that as far as social, sector performance is concerned, nothing has changed even post-liberalization. And we will discuss and debate that in greater detail in just a bit. But Zafar Sareshwala, let me come to you. And there's a point that Swami made earlier as well. How much of credit for this rapid, economic growth that we've seen in the state of Gujarat, how much of it will you give to the fact that Gujarat already had very deep roots in commerce? The high growth rate that we saw in Gujarat is something that predates the Modi era or predates the Gujarat model of development, if I were to say so. So how much of credit would you give to the fact that the state has that degree of enterprise and it's deep rooted in commerce?
Look, in fact, a lot of things which I wanted to say, Swaminathan ji has said. But anyway, I'll take further from where he took up. I've been in Gujarat all my life, and I've very distinctly observed Gujarat in last 30 years. You're absolutely right that the template of growth was already there in Gujarat. It's not that Gujarat was, Bihar or UP. But what Modi did, apart from what Swaminathan ji has said, two things which I would mention more. That one, Gujarat already had roads. But what Modi did was, in his tenure, every single 18,000 village of Gujarat got connectivity with the state transport buses. So, the connectivity to the farthest of a village was established. Second, when we have grown up studying, for every engineering or medical or pharmacy, we had to go to Maharashtra or we had to go to Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka and pay capitation fees. Mr. Modi brought a lot of reform in education. From 5 universities, he brought them to 22. And one major reform or a major thing socially which has come up, we all know that Gujarat was tinderbox of riots. I mean, if I talk about myself, my family in 50 years have seen 5 times we have grown and got down inside the grave 5 times. 69 riot, 85, 90, 92 and 2002. So, the situation was such that every 3-4 years you would have a major riot, you would have curfew of 200 days. I mean, in my 12 years of career from KG, kindergarten to 12th standard, twice we got mass promotion. We used to have 200 days of curfew. Now that has become a dream. I mean, our youth today, they don't even know what a curfew is. So Modi has given that, he has given a riot-free and peaceful Gujarat which we never had. So lot of things I always feel that unless and until you don't have continuous growth for years together, I think at least you need 10 or 15% of growth for at least 15-20 years, then you will see that money going down to the social sector. So I think Modi had created the template, and one very important thing which Modi did was that major cities of Gujarat did not have good infrastructure. And the case in point is the riverfront, the flyovers, the internal roads in major cities, Ahmedabad, Baroda, Surat, which were not there. So infrastructure development also has come up.
Absolutely. Mr. Zafar, there is no denying the fact that, infrastructure has been a big green on Mr. Modi's report card. But I'm going to take this across to Dr. Indira Hirve, who also joins us right here on the show tonight. And you know, a lot of people will say that the Gujarat development model focuses on one big thing, which is to attract big business. You know, whether it's giving them fiscal incentives, giving them land lower than the market rate, giving them soft loans. The model really has been to attract big capital investments. So, you know, whether it's FDI coming in or attract big business with these incentives. The flip side to that, many people believe, is that the fiscal incentives have resulted in a very skewed elbow room as far as investments in social development are concerned. And that perhaps explains why the economic development or the economic growth in Gujarat has not translated into social equity, into social development. Are you going to agree with me on that?
Let me start by saying that Gujarat model essentially means a jump in growth in 2002-3 to 2011-12, because Gujarat model we associate PM Modi with that, and that's why if you want to see rapid growth during that period, it really occurred. But this growth had major three reasons. One was that it created governance, improved governance, focusing on corporate investment. It improved infrastructure, focusing on the needs of the corporate sector. And then it also provided a lot of incentives to the corporate sector. You know, official policies have mentioned two things very clearly. One is that Gujarat wants to become the fastest growing economy in Asia. And second was that Gujarat wants state of the art technology from outside. Both these things are very important for Gujarat model. You know, what happened is that in the initial stages they gave sales tax incentives, and 40% of the sales tax, which is the main reason, source of revenue for Gujarat, was given away as incentives. Later on they gave capital subsidy, interest subsidy, infrastructure subsidy, and then free or very cheap, less than market price land in the initial stages. And then they also gave other incentives like cheap water to industries and so on. So, growth occurred in a very big way. There was a big jump in growth during 2002-3 to 11-12, but this growth ate away all the resources of the Gujarat, and that's why very little was left for the social sector. In the process of rapid growth, the four sectors which suffered maximum in Gujarat are employment, productive employment for masses. Second was for education. Third was health, and fourth was environmental degradation and depletion. All these four factors affected the well-being of people very urgently, and that's why, you know, the growth has been good, but it hasn't really benefited the masses. My second point is that, let me just finish, please.
Interrupt you, Dr. Ibrahim, if I'm interrupting you, I want to get a word in from everyone. Your opening comment is strong, and I want to establish the fact that we've got a panel with very diverse views, people who believe that growth has happened without social equity. There are some who believe that there's been rapid economic growth, and over time, you know, social parameters will also catch up. But, you know, coming on the point Dr. Hirve made, Ruben Ibrahim, which is that, you know, this Gujarat model of development is skewed disproportionately towards industrialization, towards business, towards attracting investments, both from domestic sources and from foreign sources, and that there seems to be a certain amount of a skepticism over that. But one would argue, what's wrong in it? I mean, what's wrong in attracting big investments? What's wrong in getting capital? What's wrong in getting private sector to put in more money, create more jobs? This sort of bias against big business, is that good?
So again, just to reiterate a point that I've made in the past, which is there is absolutely nothing wrong with growth per se, because ultimately you can't redistribute poverty. You need to generate a huge amount of wealth to be able to redistribute anything in the first place. So I don't have any problem with growth per se. I think the thing that you have to go watch out for is, what is the point of growth? So if you look at a country like Angola, which grew at about 20% year on year for almost a decade, the point is it didn't do much for Angolans. Similarly, you look at Equatorial Guinea, which on a per capita GDP basis as a per capita GDP of 20,000, but that basically means there's 5 billionaires and no one else has any money. So the point is, you can have all that growth, but to what end, right? So this is not to make the case against growth for a second. And I think Gujarat has actually done a very good job. So I've been just looking at the numbers, for instance, and it appears to me that even on something like social sector spend, Gujarat is actually spending something like 7.2% of GDP on the social sector compared to 6.7% in Kerala. So Gujarat is actually at this point in time spending more on the social sector than Kerala is. So now the bottom line is, Kerala, for instance, has a huge advantage because it started off much better off than the rest of the country. So there are going to be some lag effects that you're going to see as a consequence on the social sector side. But I do think that Gujarat is making a conscious effort to increase its social sector spend. It certainly shows up in the numbers that we are looking at. Now, whether that translates into real outcomes, etc., that's the real question, and that's an execution challenge, really.
All right, Swami, I'm going to let you come in and counter that point because, I mean, while what Rubal says is perhaps true to an extent, that, growth is all very good, but, it hasn't translated and people have been lifted out of poverty. But how do you strike that balance between welcoming big industry, welcoming big business, making yourself an auto hub, and then having social equity, then perhaps letting that economic development translate into social development as well, which hasn't happened in Gujarat. I agree with Dr. Hirve's point there that a lot of that money has been taken away. The fiscal incentives have had a very telling effect on money left for that development. Do you believe that's a price a state like Gujarat has had to pay? If you need big business to come in, you will have to dole out the fiscal incentives, you will have to defer sales taxes, you'll have to do all of that. But that's on account of getting these guys in so that they can come in, create job opportunities, create an ecosystem.
No, I think Modi, I think what the criticisms being made are of the historical Gujarat model, which continues without taking into account the Modi changes, which were aimed precisely at the points you're making. The emphasis on agriculture and getting a 10% agricultural growth was hugely positive for employment everywhere and for the rural areas. Secondly, he saw the need for labor-intensive industries and therefore started this auto hub. And when you say, are there small industries? Well, 41 ancillaries already when I last went there, and there were plans to develop 350 ancillaries as the mega plant of Suzuki and Ford and Hero, Honda, of all these coming up. So, I mean, in other words, Modi saw that there was an issue on the employment and has attempted by these particular means and by port-based development to try and bring that up. So, I think he was very conscious of it. On the social side, as I said, the state was in bad shape. We just heard that he tried to increase the number of universities. Also, I think there was the issue of English. The real problem earlier was that earlier on, Gujarat had tried to abolish English and get it out of the way. This is one reason why it didn't develop. I mean, it's the only developed state in the whole of India which didn't get a big IT industry. And it didn't get a good IT industry because of the skew. Modi, realizing the problem, and now introduced English to become compulsory, where it was earlier forbidden. I remember even in Gujarat University, I was told that English was taught in Gujarati. I mean, that was the extent of trying to keep English out in the earlier phase. So here again, Modi has tried to change it. It would take 10 to 15 years for that particular thing to come about. So I would agree that, there is a problem in the historical model. Modi tried to change it. Certainly in agriculture and auto, he has created some labor-intensive areas. The social sector, the educational sector still lags behind, and much more needs to be done there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, coming on that, Zafar Sareshwala, the point that Swami is making that there has been, the point that Swami is making is that, it has led to job creation. But, some would argue that data suggests that, the pace of job creation has not kept, or the rate of job creation has not kept pace with the extent of industrialization. I mean, if you look at the numbers, Gujarat being a petrochemical hub, petrochem industry contributes 35% to the industrial output of Gujarat. But some of these are not labor intensive. Even the Tata Motors plant at best employed 2,200 people at an investment of almost 3,000 crores. So has the job creation, has the pace of job creation not kept pace with the rapid economic growth that the state of Gujarat has seen? And does that explain the, the social unrest that we are seeing in the form of the Patidar agitation right now?
Yeah, I'll just, this is my last because I have to go, so I'll just make quick comments. What Swaminathan ji said, I'll just add to that, that Gujarat never had, I mean, we never thought we need to get educated. I mean, we have IIM, Indian Institute of Management, we have National Institute of Design, we have School of Architecture, we had at least 5 or 6 institute of prominence, but all my life I had never seen a Gujarati studying there. Only now, in recent past, we have seen Gujarati students studying in IIM, studying in NID. So, we never had this system. Have you ever seen a Gujarati IAS or a Gujarati IPS or a Gujarati IFS? We never had this culture. I mean, you'd be surprised that I'm from an industrial family, I didn't even know what this batch 92 or batch 86 is called. So, we were so alien to all this. Only when Mr. Modi made English compulsory, now after 10-15 years we are seeing that difference. Why we couldn't go in IT? Because a Gujarati could never speak English. But in job creation, people are missing one very important point, that in unorganized segment, lot of jobs have come. For example, till about 10-15 years back, only 6 or 7 flights used to take off or land in Ahmedabad. Now more than 40 flights come to Ahmedabad every single day. Now you have mushroom growth of taxi walas and industry connected to that. You come to Ahmedabad railway station, rickshaw walas. So, small, you have those people working on the footpath, you have the, we call the pathara walas. So, in informal segment, lot of jobs have been created, but yes, education was always not there. I mean, we had only 4 or 5 universities, and never a Gujarati thought that, every Gujarati thought that after 11th or 12th the son has to get into the factory or to a shop. So, this whole structural change, the mindset change has come now, and as Swaminathan ji pointed out, only now those car industries are going to come up. Unfortunately, Tata failed miserably. They didn't manufacture any nano. So, we didn't have jobs, otherwise they had promised to create 6,000 jobs. But now, when this will be operational, that is Ford, then you have Hero Honda, then you have Suzuki, which is going to be the largest plant after Japan.
Right.
So, I think when all this happens, a new segment of growth in jobs will come up in Gujarat. But as I always said, and I said earlier, you need to have continuous industrial growth for number of years, then only it will percolate down to the social segment. So, that was missing.
Right.
We didn't have enough engineers. We didn't have, our engineers could not even speak English.
Right.
So, now that employable engineers and employable graduates are coming up in Gujarat. Thank you so much.
Zafar Sareshwala, you've made a point there. I think that's a point to ponder over, that the average Gujarati did not want to study, so don't blame the Gujarat model of development on account of that. You've made a valid point there, a very spirited point if I may. But Dr. Indira Hirve, if I may ask the same question by quoting you another industry, petrochemicals, you have the largest plant in Gujarat. You talk about chemical manufacturing, you again have some really large plants there. Petrochemical contributes to 35% of Gujarat's industrial output. Chemical contributes to 15% of Gujarat's industrial output. Now, these are capital intensive industries by the nature of it. These are industries that are not labor intensive. They don't need so many hands on the shop floor. Auto, for that matter, is extremely, it's an extremely automated industry today. You don't need so much of labor. That's where the industry is moving. So, will you blame the Gujarat model for this, or is this the model for business? I mean, hats off to a man who's perhaps got these businesses to set shop in Gujarat.
Can I just intervene now, please? Hello?
Yes, ma'am, that question is for you.
Hello? Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am,
See,
please take our answer.
There are 3 points I would like to talk about. No, I'll answer that. The economic growth has been industry based, and it has been highly capital intensive. and historically Gujarat has been highly capital intensive industries, and that is why the incentives they were given to them gave promotion to petrochemicals, chemicals, fertilizers, electronics and engineering, and all these industries were capital intensive and could not create enough employment. On the other hand, the incentives given to capital intensive industries, and if you compare it with the capital incentive given to small industries, then small industries receive less than 5% of the total incentives. Incentives were just promoted to capital intensive growth. That is one thing, and that is why today workforce participation rate in Gujarat is high, but only 6.8 is formal, and this rate is much less than many other states like Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and all the southern states, etc. Secondly, this informal rate is many times less than wages. Gujarat wages are one of the lowest among the main 20 states in India. And that is why what is happening is that we have considerable working poor, and today if you go by multidimensional poverty measure that UNDP has given, Gujarat has 40% people below the poverty line. Do not go by just nutrition, go by this minimum requirement of life. That is one thing. Secondly, agricultural growth is not 10%. We have seen it again and again. Professor Alag also has pointed out in his studies that it was something between 5 and 6. But 5 and 6% rate of growth for continuous 8-9 years was definitely an achievement. There is no question about it. But this due to the various policies that happen, but the main reason for this is good rainfall for 8-9 years continuously. And that is why what happened is that after the rainfall became drought started, the rate of growth has fallen, and today in the last 2 years the rate of growth has 1.5, and earlier from 11-12 to 2 years ago it was less than 3.5%. So you can see that, and 2 years ago it was negative also. So agricultural growth you are talking about is not that much, and agricultural growth did not benefit agricultural workers because the wages were the lowest in the 20 states. It did not benefit marginal farmers because marginal farmers many times could not afford deep waters, which the cost of which was very high. Right. And thirdly, I would like to point out that education expenditure in Gujarat is less than 2% of GDP. Health expenditure is less than 1% of GDP, and that is why these two sectors are suffering, and not because of Modi's effort. There are efforts made, but the schemes are number of schemes, but small schemes, staff is less, funds are less, and they have not made much impact at the macro level. Okay. So Gujarat model has one thing, high rate of growth, but on the other hand it has all the negative aspects for employment, for health, for education, for environment and all that. So I would not consider that this model is good for any state, and no state should follow this model.
Okay. You made a point, and let me take this to Mr. Ghanshyam Shah. Then on the point of agriculture that Swami made and Dr. Hirve made as well. The fact of the matter is that we've seen pretty rapid growth in the agriculture sector, and I think that's something that you cannot argue about. Over a decade or so, the state has seen over an average of 8% growth, if I'm not wrong, in agriculture. And yet, the agri income per day is only at about 260 rupees, which is actually lower than the national average. What do you attribute this to?
Earlier historical traditions which Modi continued it. From the beginning, say first time in 1966, there was a committee to decide the minimum wage in Gujarat, and it was decided 3 rupees, and decided that they should not be given wages at the cost of productions and profit, and not necessarily in need of them, of the persons. Second thing at that time was considered that we should not give them a so high wage so they are not attracted to industries. And that model continues all throughout in Gujarat. I think what is important is this all throughout, and I expect, and Jafar Wara said that so many things has happened. I think we are blind to certain realities about it. Say that roads have increased, but in fact, way back in 1980s, all villages in Gujarat were had ST buses connected by the buses. What has happened now is that we have roads, but there are no regular buses connecting to towns to the villages. Because villages are just ignored. They have to take the chagada or a jeep dumping 25 people or 30 people. So we are indifferent. Earlier government and the present government is indifferent to a poor man. Same thing about wages and health. Similarly, see, the blind thing is not that we are not have money. There's a health kind of a thing. We have a 45% malnourished children, and we view that malnourishment is there because beauty consciousness. So we don't grant or take into account the reality at a ground level, because we as a middle class and the rulers are just blind about it. All in social sectors, we have not gone up, we have gone down. In health, MMR, in MMR from 72
Right.
to now it has become 84, and that is a CJG
Right.
process. Sex ratio has also changed and increased
Right,
in favor
right.
of male than a woman. So all continuously we are ignoring a common
Mr.
man
Shah,
and common good. It is not true that there was no English
Right.
education. Baroda University was the best
Mr. Shah,
almost
Mr. Shah.
in India and one of the leading about it. We have the 57 universities.
Okay.
We have the children universities.
Ruben Ibrahim, you touched upon the issue of poverty, earlier in your introductory remarks, and I want to ask you that, on the issue of poverty, if you were to, sort of look at Gujarat vis-a-vis other Indian states, its performance relative to other Indian states hasn't been great. Despite the strong growth that the state has seen as far as poverty is concerned, its ranking was number 3 in 1993 relative to other Indian states, and it slipped to about 10 as per the RBI report on performance of states. So what explains that according to you, and why is it that the sort of rapid economic growth that the state has seen hasn't percolated into improvement in what some would argue quality of life indicators? And this is across the board, whether it's malnourishment, whether it's life expectancy, on a whole host of social parameters, it hasn't sort of kept pace. What do you attribute this to?
So let me first just clarify something, because I think you misunderstood what I said in the earlier section, which was what I was trying to say was, as Swami pointed out, in this Modi phase of Gujarat's growth, there has actually been an attempt to bridge the gap on the social sector side. So let me give you a few examples of this. So if you look at state-wise literacy and you look at growth rates there, Gujarat's growth rate in literacy is 13% compared to Maharashtra at 7% and Tamil Nadu at 9%. If you look at infant mortality rates, Gujarat's IMR has fallen from 63 to around 40 odd in the same period. If you believe the numbers put out by the employment survey, the unemployment rate in Gujarat is just 1.2%. There are problems with the data. So it is not like Gujarat is not trying to bridge that gap. There is no question Gujarat is trying to bridge the gap. The problem really is when you make the comparison with other states. So for instance, if you look at the IMR number, which is, Gujarat is obviously, there's a significant drop in infant mortality, but in the same period of time, Tamil Nadu has reduced its IMR from 53 to 25. So that's what I was saying. So compared to the rest of the country in the last, certainly during the Modi period in Gujarat, there has been a significant improvement on a bunch of social indicators, certainly the ones that I'm looking at. But relative to other big states, you will see a problem. And that is exactly what you see when it comes to the poverty numbers as well, which is, if you look at 93, which is when the Tendulkar line comes in, Gujarat is performing better than most states at that point. Then something else happened post 93, where other states outperformed Gujarat on the reduction in poverty numbers. So again, if you just were to look at the numbers, what you'll see is that Karnataka, for instance, had a higher poverty rate than Uttar Pradesh did, which is actually quite a shocking statistic. So the real story of the last 20 years when it comes to poverty reduction is the poverty reduction in the states of Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. So once again, if you make the comparison to other high-performing states, Gujarat doesn't look good. But if you make the comparison to the rest of India, Gujarat has actually made a lot of progress.
So it's actually distance from the frontier that has perhaps got Gujarat at number 10 and not really its own performance, as Ruben is pointing out there. But Swami, I do want to ask you, the Gujarat development model obviously worked very well for Mr. Modi as the chief minister. It's a model that's been often quoted, and like you initially said in your opening statements, states have tried to replicate that model. Why is it that Mr. Modi could not follow that model in the center?
Oh, I think the answer to that last question is very simple. If you are chief minister, you can be quite sure that every single district collector is answerable to you and will get his marching orders if he doesn't follow. But a prime minister cannot give any instructions. So the prime minister can only attempt to persuade chief ministers to do what he wants to do. We have also got to a stage today where of the total government spending, states are spending 62% and the center is only spending 38%. The balance between the center and states has completely turned around. It is no longer center being dominant and the states being supplicants for money. It's become the other way around. So I said, I would say that in the current model, India is done much more by chief ministers than by prime ministers. At the grassroots level, actually giving orders down to the districts and seeing the implementation, that is done by chief ministers. There is only a very limited amount that you can do at the center. I think a couple of other remarks I'll mention. You don't normally regard Gujarat as a tribal state. And yet the fact is that the tribal population in Gujarat is about 16% of the population, which is like double the national average. So this is one reason which also tends to pull Gujarat down in terms of the social indicators. I mean, if you had in other tribal states like, let's say, Madhya Pradesh, you would say, well, of course, it's a tribal state. Well, Gujarat is, to a significant extent, though not a dominant extent, a tribal state, and that has pulled it down. But above all, the point I would like to make is, Gujarat is attracting huge numbers of migrants from Uttar Pradesh and Bihar from the labor. So conditions cannot be that bad. Even more, I mean, I remember when I covered the general election and we asked the UP walas, what do you think of the Modi model? And the guy says, our relatives have gone to Gujarat and they say it is a place of peace and prosperity. I said, but don't you know that, there was itna bada danga tha, so many people were killed in 2002. The villagers looked very puzzled. He says, danga to yahan Uttar Pradesh mein hai. हमारे भाई बोलते हैं कि वहाँ गुजरात में बिल्कुल शांत है. So I said, the notion that everything is bad socially in the other side. Now, these are all relative things. There are certain things that certainly in Gujarat they have achieved. Right. The fact that it is a magnet for massive labor migration, right, and that, in Gujarat, the migrants are treated properly, whereas in Maharashtra, they are told, you sons of bitches, get back. We want to throw you out. Okay. I mean, look at that difference.
Okay. A quick closing comments I want to get from my panelists. We're really running out of time. Dr. Indira Hirve, we've tried to poke holes at the Gujarat model of development, and we've tried to sort of do a comprehensive debate with the constraint of time. But very fundamental question is, if the model was so ineffective, if it's led to so much of social stress, if there hasn't been rapid progress on social indicators, and if the development has been lopsided, then what explains the fact that this is a government that's been voted to power for 22 years, and even now going into polls, they are widely seen as the favorites? Why do the people of Gujarat, still have faith in the Gujarat model of development?
Yeah, can I just answer that question?
Sure, Dr. Hirve.
Yeah. So what I would like to say, first of all, very briefly, that the data given on literacy are totally incorrect. If you go by the census of population data, if you go by NSSO data, and if you go by ESR data, Pratham's annual reports, then Gujarat quality of education has in some cases deteriorated. Can you imagine that? And secondly, if you go by census of population, then the rate of increase in literacy between 2001 and 11 is such that Gujarat was 16 in 2001 and it became 18 in 2011. That shows relative deterioration in Gujarat. And again, the literacy part, spending less than 2% when the norm is 6 to 7%. Is really too low. How do you expect better results with that kind of expenditure? But if I talk about migration, I mean, as I said, employment opportunities are there, people come here, but the quality of employment is very low, and that's why their working poor are very high. But why Gujarat elects BJP? There are 2-3 reasons for that. One is that there is no opposition worth the name. That's one thing. Now the opposition is emerging, of course, this time, so we don't know whether the result would improve or not. But that's one thing. Second is that there is a huge propaganda being done about Gujarat. And you know, for example, when agricultural growth is right now 1.5%, there is a talk of doubling farm income in 5 years' time, and they talk in such a big way that people get carried away by the hype. And hype is very big. And thirdly, lot of propaganda. Lot of propaganda is being done, you know, in newspapers, in posters, in everywhere, and the PM speaks extremely well, though he doesn't speak truth, but he speaks well, and he has taken in, that's why people are taken in by that kind of a speech. And that's why if BJP wins again and again, that's not because of Gujarat model successful, nothing at all.
Okay, tell that to the BJP and they will not believe you. But I think a closing question to Ruben Abraham. And Ruben, you know, I have to quickly ask you this question. You know, the BJP, yes, seen as favorites, but if the BJP were to do badly in Gujarat, if the results were to be adverse, if the vote share goes down significantly, do we run the risk of Mr. Modi moving significantly away from this model, significantly moving away from, you know, industrialization, ease of doing business? Do we risk him turning more populist? Do we risk him turning more left of the center, something that he's already beginning to do in New Delhi?
So I think unfortunately that problem we're already dealing with, because I think that process was set into motion when Rahul Gandhi made that famous comment about Soot Boot Ka Sarkar, which I think is the point at which you actually see a leftward tilt from Mr. Modi. I don't think that this election or a reduction in vote share isn't going to necessarily turn him any further left than where he is already. Unfortunately, I think that is where the polity of the country is, which is left of center. So as much as, you know, I certainly am either a centrist or right of center, but if that's not where the polity of the country is, then by definition, if you want to win elections, you have to play the rules of the game, which is to play on by left of center rules. So I think if that's what it takes to win an election, that's what he'll do. So I think that's what you're really seeing. I think this notion of Mr. Modi as a big bang reformer, I think his instinct is to modernize. It's not to reform at the scale of a Thatcher or a Reagan.
Okay, his instinct is to modernize. Hopefully, polity will make the right turn quite literally in this country. But completely timed out. Thank you so much, Ruben Ibrahim, Swaminathan Iyer, Zafar Sureshwala, Mr. Himanshu Shah, and of course, Dr. Indira Hirve, for joining in with your perspective on this special edition of the India Development Debate, where we put the spotlight on the Gujarat model of development.
Indeed, it's a model that has served Gujarat well as far as industrialization is concerned. There have been pockets of brilliance, but social indicators don't really tell the whole story.